It's the Todd Feinberg Show, live from the NJ Diet Studios on WTIC News Talk 1080.
So this week is the first time in 2 years we've been allowed to have people in studio. And it's very exciting to have people guests in studio, so I'm celebrating it. Rob Sampson is here, state senator. He brought state rep Gale Mastrofrancesco. This is the backbone of the conservative caucus right here in our studio. The backbone on WTIC, and this is where it belongs. So welcome, folks.
Excited to be here.
Wait a sec. Try it again.
Excited to be here, Todd.
Okay,
there you go.
Gale.
Thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wait a sec. I've got to figure out which thing controls your voice. Talk again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, good.
Thank you, Todd. A pleasure to be here.
Okay. So what's going on? What are you guys working on? Tell us about tomorrow.
Well, first, I just want to say that I'm excited to have an equally performing microphone to you instead of being on the phone, where we get blown away all the time by your booming voice.
Oh, yes.
Every time I listen to the playback of an interview, I'm like, why does his voice sound so good? It's because I'm on the phone, you know? So,
yeah, but over the air it sounds better.
Does it really?
Yes, because we have a thing called a sound chain that compresses all the audio, so there's less difference between it, and the levels are So if you're listening on our recording of it, our podcast, then the levels can be off and stuff because they haven't gone out over the
scientific mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, no, everybody understands.
I see. Yeah. So you asked, what we're up to.
Yeah.
Representative Mastrofrancesco and I, we went out this morning to Clinton to talk to a group of about 60 conservative women, which was a wonderful experience. I'll just say, something about that, which is that in my entire experience in politics, this is the time that I have seen more grassroots activism than ever. People are coming out of the woodwork ever to get involved, to be more informed, and trying to take their government back at all levels. I mean, we saw it, with the Board of Eds and the mask issue and stuff like that. But I think it's happening all over, and it's inspiring. It really is.
So people don't understand this about elections. They think of elections as being this fixed unit of voters, and that fixed unit of voters changes its mind about who's it's going to vote for from one election to the next, as opposed to that there are two different, or at least two different groups of voters, most of whom vote the same way all the time. But the energy that they feel about voting changes. Right now, Democrats are depressed about being Democrats because Democrats are doing such awful things to the state and to the country. So that depresses Democratic turnout and makes Republicans get excited, right?
Absolutely correct. In fact, I think one of the problems with the Republican Party historically is that there is a feeling that we need to moderate our positions in a blue state like Connecticut in order to sell our message. And
or to avoid being attacked for things that are being mislabeled.
Right. But I've never believed that. I've always believed that the issue in Connecticut is about enthusiasm. There's a gap in enthusiasm between the Democrats and Republicans. And if we could have a unified Republican Party, we could be preaching our full, unadulterated message with force, and we would gather more enthusiasm, and we would have the energy on our side.
So
and
I think
like
what
that's
you're
happening
saying is,
automatically.
if you are a wimpy Republican and you're not willing to say what Republican values are, which are very compelling, that's what the founding fathers built the country on, and that's what caused our great success as a nation. And now you have Republicans running around thinking that somehow that's a tainted brand, that you can't talk about freedom of speech and all the other rights that we've acquired because we had these brilliant founders 240 years ago. They think you can't run on that. Gale, why don't you address this a little bit? Because you're newer. How long ago was your first run?
2018 I ran. I was started in 2019. But yeah, I agree. I think people, when you run for office and you're holding office, you need to stick to your principles. And I know sometimes it's very hard to do because there's a lot of emotional issues up in Hartford that we talk about. But you have to stick to your guns. You have to stick to the principles. And the oath of office that you took, I always wonder how a legislator can sit there and take that oath of office and then go ahead and vote against that oath of office of protecting the Constitution.
Well, give us the answer. You know the answer to that.
You have to. Listen, there's tough decisions that have to be made, but you have to vote the right way. You have to vote based on your principles,
yes,
and those are the Constitution.
You vote your principles. Other people cave in. What do you think the forces are that make them cave in?
Their district. You constantly hear people voting their district. I think they believe that there's people in their district that believe differently than they do, maybe more to the center. because they have to be better at promoting their message and why they should be voting the other way and why they vote the way they do.
When they see blocks of voters who disagree with them, they tend to hedge on their message. This is your thesis, Rob, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And that hedging doesn't allow people to hear the beauty of the argument coming from the Republican side.
Yeah, it's sad to say. I mean, Republicans these days, the vast majority of them are trying to recreate the Democrat message because they think that's what sells in Connecticut. What they need to realize is that the Republican message is a better message. And if we could stick to it and be compelling in describing, in fact, I've tried to be that example. You know, I don't hold back. You hear me on your radio program, and when I campaign as a stalwart conservative Republican.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I never back off from it, and I'm quite popular as a result. And the other folks that have followed in my footsteps in that same vein, Representative Mastrofrancesco took my place in the State House, and other folks that you have on the air, Representative Fiorello, Representative Dauphiné, these people are amazing. And they're quite popular because they're unafraid to be strong Republicans. And, my hope has always been that we would be an example so that the other Republicans could say, hey, look at these guys. They're unafraid to be Republicans, and they still win their elections, and they're still popular. But it's a hard thing to overcome because there are a lot of forces pushing them to go the other way, mostly the leadership of the party and the two caucus leaders. But the biggest issue really, I think, more than anything, is that they don't have the confidence to be able to explain their positions well. And that's what we've got to get back to, is understanding the value system of America. And you do a great job of that, of teaching civics and our American values.
Do you think that there are Republicans who maybe have an instinctive attraction to being a Republican but don't actually know how to make those arguments?
Yeah, I was going to say that I do believe in their heart that most of the Republicans do hold the same values. They just can't articulate why. Mm-hmm. So they're a little nervous about voting that way. So I do believe in their heart they feel that way. And a lot of times they're saying, good job, I don't think I can do that. It happens, but I think that if you truly believe in your convictions and you truly believe in something, you have no problem defending them.
You would think that would be what it's all about, but it seems there are a lot of people attracted to politics who have different motives for getting into it, and they might be ego-driven or wanting a lot of attention or whatever,
or no attention. And people know, well, it happens. There are people up there in
Hartford.
They want to
be able to work quietly.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah.
The expectation is that people that get elected to something as significant as, state legislator, as far as a public office, that they'd have a good knowledge base for the law, about the Constitution, about the history of our country. But sadly, they don't. Most people are, average, people, off the street who become involved in politics for whatever reason. They're recruited by their local town committee because they present well, or they're an impressive person in their own way, in their own industry, etc. But there's no real training that goes on to say that you need to know about these things before you run for office. Our election system allows the more popular person to win, not the more qualified person or necessarily the person who understands history or economics or anything else that might be of value. And that's one of the dangers of having too much government, is because now you're taking people that are not skilled in these areas and you're asking them to make decisions about everything from healthcare to education to science, like we heard about for the last
Which
year.
is why people should just say, we shouldn't be deciding this. Too complicated. And that means you've got the wrong people looking to make policy. Let individuals make policy through their market choices. And then we're better off, right?
Amen to that.
Rob, Sampson, Gale, Mastrofrancesco are here. And that's the first time I've ever had trouble saying your name. I think.
Can you say it 3 times fast?
I can, actually. I've practiced. So what's going on this week?
Well, the biggest thing that I'd like to draw attention to is that there is a very important public hearing happening tomorrow, which is going to be on Zoom and on YouTube and the Government Administration and Elections Committee, where both Gale and I serve as the ranking Republican members, which is essentially the minority chairman, which you take for a grain of salt since we don't have a whole lot of power. We're just a noisy minority.
Mm-hmm. You get to be there, but not influence the outcome.
Right. And, we're supposed to be the spokespeople for our respective House and Senate Republican caucuses. And we do a good job. I mean, we're fiery and we're feisty, but we're outnumbered. They got, 2-to-1 or even more votes on each committee that we serve on. But the big deal is that they're trying to bring back COVID voting, Todd. If you remember in 2020.
Hang on a sec. Hold that thought. I like that tease, COVID voting. We're going to describe what that is and talk more about it. Stay with us. We got Rob and Gale here. Quick break on WTIC.
It's the Todd Feinberg Show, live from the NJ Diet Studios on WTIC News Talk 1080.
Thanks for being here. Thursday afternoon this week, we're blowing through it. Is it true? It's supposed to be up near 60 degrees on Sunday. I love how crazy the weather is this year. We've got Gale Mastrofrancesco here, state rep from which town? Wolcott, and Rob Sampson, senator from Wolcott. It's great to have people. We've got all the regional power.
The people
tilted towards Wolcott.
The people of Wolcott are very fortunate to have Representative Mastrofrancesco representing them.
Are you guys well briefed on the ancestry of that name?
Oliver Wolcott?
Yes. Like, are you aficionados?
I don't know if I would call myself a historian, but I know who Oliver Wolcott was and his...
I read up on him a few years ago, so I could learn more about the name, but I don't remember any of it.
We have other famous people from the town of Wolcott, too. I'm trying to remember his name now.
How famous?
Mr. Alcott, Louisa May Alcott's husband, is from the town of
Is he still
Wolcott
living
also,
there?
Yes.
No. I wonder if you saw him at the corner store. No?
Before my time, I'm afraid.
All right, so tell us about the meeting tomorrow.
And what I know about him is that he was a contemporary of Henry David Thoreau, who I am definitely a fan of.
Oh, yeah?
Civil disobedience is his claim to fame.
Civil disobedience is a great thing.
Yes, it is. And we saw it at work over the past year, and I couldn't be happier to see people really reclaiming what it is to be an American, which is our American system of government, you always like to say. And that's the people holding their elected officials accountable and reminding them everywhere they go that you work or that the elected officials work for them.
All right, so you guys represent your towns in the legislature. So fill us in on these details about what's going on and what's top of mind for you guys.
Well, top of mind, like I said, is COVID voting. In 2020, the Secretary of the State in Connecticut, along with the governor, used COVID-19 as an excuse to basically pull a scam. And that scam was to imply that it was okay for them to send absentee ballot applications to every person in the state of Connecticut on our voter rolls.
Without a reason. This is illegal in the state of Connecticut, right?
Well, the state of Connecticut has a constitution, and the constitution is quite clear that you're eligible to vote by mail for very specific reasons. And you can read it right in the constitution, and it says that you can vote by absentee ballot through the mail if you are out of the country because you're in the military, or you're out of town on business, or you are disabled, or you are personally ill. And what they're attempting to do, like they did in 2020, was to imply that something more than your personal illness, like the sense that there is a pandemic in the air, is also good enough. And as much as I'm sympathetic to the idea that we need to enable people to vote, especially during a pandemic, you wouldn't have necessarily needed to change the Constitution to make that lawful. And they just skipped that step. And it was one thing because there was an actual pandemic happening in November of 2020. But it's a different story today. There is no pandemic that is widely affecting the citizens of Connecticut, and people are going out every day.
Isn't that in the meaning of pandemic? So if a pandemic is not widely affecting, there is no pandemic.
I would agree. And so, but what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and continue this perpetual pandemic for whatever political purpose they can, and we've witnessed that recently. They tried to hang on to the mask requirement in schools over the extension of the state of emergency, and now they're going to try and hang on to this COVID voting. And the issue is that by redefining the word illness to no longer mean your personal illness, suddenly everybody becomes eligible for an absentee ballot, and it's a backdoor way to create no excuse absentee voting.
It's a blatant lie. I think you have to describe it as that. It's a deliberate misinterpretation of long-held and long-followed rules that are written into the Constitution in order to be able to rig elections. So Democrats are trying to steal elections in a very concrete way by mailing ballots illegally to voters and really doing a huge dump of them or ballot applications or ballots? Which is it?
It's ballot applications, and you're right. It is a despicable and deceitful lie that they are perpetrating on the citizens of Connecticut. Let me just clarify that it's perfectly lawful to send ballot applications to voters. People have been doing it forever. Candidates do it, local, political bodies, town committees. That's fine. But you were always limited by the fact that you could only send them to people who were truly eligible under the Constitution. By changing the definition of illness in this bill that they're going to run through the legislature in the coming days, they are redefining that purpose to make everyone eligible, which is not true, and it is wrong. And they're doing it for a singular purpose, and they're doing it for the purpose of knowing that they benefit, that the Democrats will benefit from a corrupt election that sends out absentee ballot applications to thousands and thousands of people that are not on the voter rolls, people that are deceased, people that have moved on. And they know that people are going to cast votes for other people. People are going to cast votes for their elderly relatives.
You mean they're going to be using someone else's ballot and right to vote simply because the application has arrived at the House? Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely correct.
And because there are maybe somebody who's died a few years earlier is still on a voting roll, or something like that. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yes, and there's a lot of documentation from this. Back in the 2020 election, ever since, there's been numerous independent investigations going on. There's an organization in the state called Fight Voter Fraud. If you go to their website, you can read a lot of the things that they've discovered, including thousands of duplicate voters. They have cases where
the same name appearing twice in the same house or in different homes, different addresses. I guess somebody moves and it stays there.
Yeah, I imagine all of the above. There's things that are completely obvious and admitted to by the Secretary of State and the state government already. Like, for instance, they send out millions of ballots because we have 3.5 million people in the state, and maybe 65 or 70% of them are registered voters. So that's millions of ballot applications going out at great expense to taxpayers. Would you believe that hundreds of thousands of those were returned in the mail? That's the first problem. It's the first indication that you know that there's a major problem.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, these organizations have been uncovering more and more information all the time. One of the scariest things, Todd, is they actually have evidence that there were absentee ballot applications mailed to criminals serving time in prison, mailed to their actual cell, and then completed, sent back, and then the ballot was sent to them and completed, and their vote counted in the election. In Connecticut, it's illegal.
Illegally.
Yeah.
A convicted felon can't vote.
How is it even possible that so many steps could be completed
without there being any filtering process?
And that's the problem. There is really no checks and balances in Connecticut to have a significant number of mail-in ballots as part of an election.
Because it's unconstitutional.
Well, and they're even blatant about it now before they sent out the applications because of COVID. And they're telling you right now that COVID is going to be lasting through November. The theater is going to continue through November because that's when it expires.
That was even questionable 2 years ago.
Exactly. So how do they know? The pandemic, in my mind, is over with. So there is a process they were going through to try to change the Constitution for no excuse absentee voting, but they can't even wait until then.
They can cheat. Why bother?
As we've heard them say, never let a good crisis go to waste. So they're going to continue on with this.
What is it, Anthony? My producer's smiling at me like he's got something wonderful he needs to add to the conversation.
I just wanted to say, I obviously haven't lived in Connecticut long, but when I was registered in Pennsylvania, I was sent a ballot application to receive a ballot. I never filled it out, and they still sent me the ballot. For no reason, they still sent it.
So it came automatically?
And I did use it and submitted it. But yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. It's the extent that it goes. You should at least have to ask for it or fill out the form.
That's a really interesting dynamic. I hadn't heard of that one before, where without filling out the ballot application that gets mailed to you without request, they automatically send the ballot. We got to watch for that in Connecticut. All right, we're going to pause for news. We'll talk more with Rob and Gale coming up on WTIC.